Hey, and everybody, welcome back to Building the Black Educator Pipeline Podcast. I'm your host, Shayna Terrell. I am Director of Pipeline Programming at the Center for Black Educator Development. Welcome back, everybody. I am an educator activist who's dedicated my life to fighting for freedom and liberation for my people. A native of the South Bronx, but I have been adopted by these Philadelphia streets, y'all. I am here. My organization, the Center for Black Educator Development, affectionately known as CBED. We have been in existence since 2019. We seek to diversify the teacher pipeline by building and rebuilding the Black teacher pipeline. Now, how do we do that? We do that by implementing a 4-4-4 model that will support aspiring educators 4 years in high schools, 4 years in college, and their first 4 years of teaching. And we do this work by standing on 4 pillars: pipeline programming, which is strengthening pathways to teaching; developing culturally relevant pedagogy; innovative professional learning; and advocating for critical public policy. So a major shout out to all the funders and all the partners who were courageous enough to do this work, to invest in this work, and revolutionary enough to believe in us. We love you and we thank you. I also always have to give a major shout out to Citizens Ed for giving this platform and this opportunity for us to talk about the tools and the solutions to rebuild the Black teacher pipeline, and giving us a platform to talk to real people doing real work and real things in this real struggle. So thank you. So though it's not Women's History Month, y'all, we are still celebrating the work of our sisters in education and rolling with the theme, the voices of Black women leaders, building the education pipeline. Today, we'll be talking to 2 amazing historians, researchers, authors, and freedom fighters. When we analyze the research, we find that there are tons of gaps in documenting the contribution that Black people have made to this world, especially in education. I love when there are Black women who are lifting up other Black women. Black women are the most educated group in America, but yet fall into a category of the most underpaid in comparison to their white counterparts. Black women are more likely than other groups of women and nationalities to work in the lowest paying occupation. Why is that, we ask? Because sisters are about that service and sisters are about that servant leadership. That's why. Black women are out here shining and grinding while still facing racism, sexism, and discrimination. So it's our legacy to be the backbone of our communities despite the challenges we face. So shout out to all my co-conspirators watching the show right now. I would love for you guys to like and share, of course, this podcast. But right now, if you're watching, comment in the chat. What are some unique challenges that you think Black women face in education today? I'll say that again. Comment in the chat. What are some unique challenges that you think Black women face in education today? These 2 women we will be connecting with today are going to tell us all about great Black women leaders in Philadelphia that overcame challenges and helped to our communities rise to greatness. My guests are co-authors of the book, They Carried Us: The Social Impact of Philadelphia's Black Women Leaders. So let me introduce first Dr. Alina M. Baker-Rodgers. Alina is a native of West Philadelphia who now resides in Virginia. She's a former chair and vice president of several nonprofit organizations, served on mayoral advisory committees, and as a board member and chair of Philadelphia County Assistance Office. A lifelong educator, she holds a doctorate in higher education leadership, a former university administrator, assistant professor of educational research. Alina is also a past recipient of the Jane S. Abrams and Cecil B. Moore Community Service Award. Next to the stage, Fasaha Traylor. Fasaha founded and directed an independent school, administered a program to link resources of local universities with community needs, served on the board of the National Human Rights Groups, and chaired the boards of a children advocacy and grant maker organization. She is a 22-year veteran of philanthropy, and now a principal of Lift Every Voice LLC. She was awarded a National Science Foundation Fellowship, the Arts Peters Memorial Fellowship in Journalism, and the Temple University Urban Fellowship. Please welcome to the show Dr. Alina Baker-Rodgers and Fasaha Traylor. Welcome, welcome, y'all.
Hey, thanks for
I'm
having
glad
us.
to be here. So
I'm
glad
excited to
to
get y'all here.
get your
So,
energy.
thank you. Well, before we hop in this conversation, I need to give a disclaimer to all my co-conspirators watching out there. For my mom, if you're watching this show and any of my elders watching, I've had direct requests from Dr. Rogers and Mama Fasaha. I am to call Dr. Rogers Sissy in this conversation, and I'm not allowed to call Mama Fasaha Mama anymore past this point, and I'm not allowed to call her Miss. Okay? So yes, I was raised right, y'all, but I also want to honor their request. So I don't need no elders coming from me in the chat. Okay. I don't need it. Talking about you need to be saying Miss and Mama. I know, but y'all asked me not to. Okay, so y'all gotta protect me from the elders, child. Protect me. Yes. So I want to start off, as I always do with my guests, about talking through you guys' journey in education. What pushed you guys to become educators?
Wow, that is such a simple but great question. I think for me it was I had always had a passion for reading and learning, and I pretty much knew in ninth grade that I wanted to be an English teacher because I loved reading and writing, and I was pretty good at it. But I think that the critical point came for me when I found myself pregnant at 16, and my mom, not so much me, but my mom had decisions to make about, what the immediate next portion of my life was going to be. And one of the most important decisions she made was that I would continue to dream and to move towards my dream. So what that means is that somebody knows me. They're saying, "OMG, Dr. Rogers."
That's Mama Toya. That's Mama Toya. She's a faithful watcher of the show. Shout out to Mama Toya.
Okay, Mama Toya. So for my mother, what that meant was that the village immediately, took charge. And, I stayed home for 1 year. My mother was in close contact with, folks at Bartram High School, and where I was a student. And, I stayed home 1 year, but ended up graduating in the 11th grade. And it's, pretty much all history from there. My mother knew nothing about, how to complete college applications or the FAFSA form or anything like that. But, she sat with me as much as she could to try to figure out those forms. And I will tell you that from that experience, the filling out the forms, the being a first generation college student, first at Cheney State. It was Cheney State then, yeah. First at Cheney State, and then realizing that was just too big of an environment for me. I lived a very sheltered, life, and went to community college of Philadelphia. And that, for me, having that experience as a first generation college student, a teenage mom, that actually was what propelled me into my work as an educator. And in fact, my first job was as a director at the Center for Literacy. And you talk about the pipeline for me, and my work started there with, working with or, supporting the tutoring and classroom instruction of folks who were in adult basic education and or GED classes, as well as workforce development classes and things like that. So all of the work that I have done since that time has touched the pipeline, has been about support services for a low income minority, or first generation college students, and then also later on, someone mentioned that I know Karen Newsom. She was one of my mentees and a teacher who worked for me when I was at Arcadia University. And then my point in saying that is that helping Black educators themselves move through that pipeline.
That's right. Lifting as you climb. As you climb. Yeah. But you have a strong story of like persistence. And I think that sometimes when we're talking about Black women professionals, especially doctors and researchers, people have this idea of what your pathway should look like or what your roadmap to get there should look like. So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you sharing that story and letting us know, like, everybody's roadmap looks different, and it
Yeah.
doesn't look all neat and beautiful and packaged.
Right.
But it is a beautiful journey and it is a beautiful story.
Yeah, and
Um,
it has been. Yeah.
Fasaha, hey.
Okay, well, what I think that the thing that Sissy and I share, well, we share a lot of things, but one of the main things we share is a love of reading and writing. And I think that any educator who doesn't, love learning and reading and writing, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, but
You do, you just
um,
don't want to. But
She already did.
um, you know, I sort of came into education as a during a period in the country when the focus in Black communities was on building independent institutions, and the idea that Black people really needed to have institutions that believed in them, that encouraged them, uh, really led to our formation of Nitha Musasa, African Free School, which was an independent Black institution, long before charters were even a gleam in anybody's eye. It was an effort to say, you know, it was like a direct um, we were thinking that the folks who said, "Oh, they're poor, they're this, they can't learn," we have to, have all these excuses, and we were thinking, no, no, that is not where we are going.
Mhm.
We came from a tradition of, people setting up schools out of nothing, having, like in Ruth Wright Hare's story, having schools set up in railroad cars. So we were not into that. And so we created Nitha Musasa, and I was its founder. And which was how I actually met uh, Sharif El Mekki when he was a little kid.
Yes,
So
okay.
yeah, yeah.
You planted that seed for Big Sharif to grow into who he is today. We
Well,
appreciate you for that.
whatever little part I had in it, I'm very proud of it. And I maintained my um, really, I have always been a reader, a writer, a learner, always. And that is true no matter where I was, whether I was in philanthropy,
Mhm.
whether I was in community-based work, whether I was in school-based work, whether I was in human rights work. It really didn't matter. That was the thing that I took to wherever I went. So.
So both of you have led schools. So for me, I look at both of you as like architects of the Black teacher pipeline. You guys are out here leading and building nation. But during those times, Mom Saha, that you're talking about, all Black schools like weren't popular. What inspired
Oh,
both of you to start and lead schools?
well, for me, it was really the time. It was the time. It was the early 1970s. Um, that was a time when Black people had just come out of the civil rights movement, and it was all around us. It was a question of, okay, what's the next step? What do we need to do? And our desire was to demonstrate how it should be done. Um, and that was the inspiration. The inspiration came from the community. There were, and especially in Philadelphia in the early 1970s, early 80s, it was really difficult educationally in Philadelphia. I guess it
Mhm.
was difficult everywhere. I mean, in Boston there was the school desegregation battles.
Mhm.
In New York there were community school battles.
Hmm.
uh, in Philadelphia, there were strikes nearly every.
All the time.
nearly every single year there was a strike, and parents were beside themselves. It was kind of like it is now, in the during the era of the pandemic, when
Yep.
parents are like, I can't, about teaching their kids at home. I mean, it was a situation where Black parents, especially in Philadelphia, were faced with months. I don't mean weeks or days, months
Yes.
of teachers
Hmm.
being out on strike. And, this was in part our response. We needed to take control of this
Mm-hmm.
and create, a setting where Black kids could be educated, um, aside from the whole question of, strikes and, all of that. So
So you
that
responded
was
to the
also
call.
a big impetus.
Y'all responded to the call, responded to the needs of the community.
We had to. It was one way of responding to the call, and we really felt that we had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to just jump in and say that I was not a founder of schools in the way that my colleague Fasaha has been. Uh, was a person who positioned herself to be the head of departments that were responsible for that work. So,
Mm-hmm.
as much as I was, it's interesting because I think that sometimes when people think about higher education administration or higher education administrators, they don't necessarily think about the people whose work is focused on the kind of efforts that I led.
Mm-hmm.
And those were about bringing people, non-traditional people, into the fold,
Let's
into the
say it. Black
education.
people bringing black
Black
people.
people, bringing black people into the educational fold and providing the daily, hands-on, all hands on deck support, whether it was academic support or social support, connecting with the Department of Public Welfare or connecting with schools for parents who are having issues with their kids, or working with homeless students, which I did as well, not a stone's throw from where Fasaha lived. It was positioning myself to be able to have an effective role, with those students. The other thing I want to go back and say is that when I was at Bartram, a student at Bartram, I was in the human services program.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about that program. I didn't even quite know what it was, but despite the fact that I was um, looked at by my white teachers as being, a special young black girl who should go on to college because I was unusual in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And you all know what I mean, right?
Yes.
Uh, what I said was, so instead of going to John Bartram's School of Motivation, which was the track for college students, I chose to go to Human Services because something about that mattered to me. And I wasn't quite sure what, but I will tell you that by the time that I graduated from Widener University, from the School of Human Services Professions, I was
Continue on
very
that track.
clear. I was very clear on what that work was. And then the last thing I want to say is that the strikes in Philadelphia every year were crazy. And
Mm.
I remember I was always a bicyclist. And I remember when I first started at Cheney, I couldn't get to 69th Street, And so what I did was I rode my bike to 69th Street every day and locked it up, and then was able to board the suburban buses that took
Mm-hmm.
you further out. Because a lot of times it was the buses and the trains in the city, but the suburban rails and buses were still
We're still
running.
working.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a
Yes. So the
personal take on what.
strikes was crazy here. So my other leading question into this is with with that happening, especially when we talk about black independent schools, what happened to black independent schools? Like
Hmm.
those schools have a legacy in our communities of teaching and training some of the best leaders that we know now, like the Sharif El Mekki. What happened to black independent schools?
Well, I think that I have a friend who's always saying, that needs to be written about. That needs to be written about. But I think that there's a number of things that happened with Black independent schools. Number one, I think that the economics of running
Yes.
them was very, very difficult. Now, back in the days before charter schools, um, it was like a matter of tuition. I
Mhm.
mean, and what we did at Nitha Musasa was we had, a tuition plan, and we had, a sort of barter system where people could come in and work in exchange for tuition, and et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera. But it ultimately became really something that it just could not work that way. Okay, because teachers need to be paid, you know, and of course it faded away after I left. But I think that the economics of it was just really, they were brutal. They were
And
really.
you're lifting up a really serious problem, like even that Black charter leaders have today. Um,
Oh yeah.
the means and the resources to the actual financial and budget and finances that it takes to run a school, and
Mhm,
access to wealth or access to people who have wealth, which then
mhm,
leads into a whole nother conversation of access to people who believe in Black children, who believe in Black people, who believe in Black leaders enough to actually
Mhm.
invest in them. It's always
mhm.
a topic of conversation around, especially around our current charters. Well, who do you have on your board, or who are you getting to be able to like get money for you and things of that nature? But
That's
I
an
mean, it's
important, yeah, that's an important consideration. And it might seem strategic in terms of, board development, but that, and that's because it is strategic,
mhm.
and it has to be.
Yes, it's extremely strategic. But when you are in these spaces and these places where you don't have access and you don't have connection, which happens a
Mm.
lot of times to our Black folks, you're
Hmm.
going to have a financial strain on your institution. And it's going to take Hoochie Jackalee to get you through, right? You're going to have to keep fighting and
Yeah.
finding and scrapping for it to happen. But that's an excellent point that you bring up for Sahara.
And I just
So
want to
let's,
say that it
uh-huh.
also continues. It's also it's not just at that K-12 level, but it's also at the higher ed level as
The
well.
HBCU
Uh,
level, we
you
know right
know,
now, yes, you are hitting on an excellent. We know right now that HBCUs are struggling for funding. But
mhm.
even right there, some of these are public institutions that should be getting more funding from federal or state or local governments, and they're just not. So yes,
Mhm.
it definitely continues on from K2 into the collegiate space, without a doubt.
And even with the again the types of programs that I led were that they went into the category of special initiatives. So always looking for funding, for those types of programs, is really a challenge. So
Mm.
Definitely. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about They Carry Us and this book and this phenomenal work that you all did. But I want to start the conversation off just by talking about the title alone, because
mm,
I really want people to understand what that means. So when you say carried, they carried us, what are y'all making reference to?
mm,
We are talking about the work these women did, the formative, elemental, foundational work that these women did. Whether they were working in, community organization or movement activism or education
mm,
or faith or the arts or sports or wherever they were working,
mhm,
they did work that carried the whole community. And ultimately, because of that, carried parts of Philadelphia. And one of the things that we are, most intent on is making the city of Philadelphia acknowledge the work that these women have done.
absolutely.
And
You
I
know
want to take a break
the
real quick and shout out. Somebody asked about this, so
turn
I
it
need to
over.
make. There we go. I just want to make sure I plug the book. So the poster. Oh, let me get it here. The poster that is behind these two, both of these beautiful women, is
Yes.
the poster for their book. They carried us: the social impact of Philadelphia's Black women leaders. Excellent book. So if you get the opportunity, please go out and get that. Dr. Roger, sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to give y'all a plug real quick.
Oh, well, we appreciate that, and I almost forgot. Age has a way of coming up on you. I almost forgot what it was I was going to say. But listening to Fasaha, I don't know why, but Fasaha, this is the very first time when we've talked about the title when the song which just popped in my head was "We're Moving On Up."
Mm.
To the east side, to
side.
G-Lex
Yeah,
apartment
Who
in
got
the
their piece of the
sky.
pie? Okay.
But what's the part about us scraping and crawling? What was that? What was that? Is it the same song?
I don't know.
Beans on burn in the kitchen, fist on
Well,
fry on the grill. I
No,
don't
what
know.
I was going to say is that these women, of they carried us, they did the early, they did the early scraping part. They did the, that hard, that's where I'm going with that, that hard and, evolutionary work so you can imagine, the work that all of us, do now in comparison to when they had to do it and the social issues that they had to contend with. Okay, I'll just say it: the racism and the
There we go.
discrimination,
The sexism.
and the sexism, that they had to deal with, all of that pushback. These early women, they were persistent. So we wanted, a title that really spoke to them and spoke to their legacy for us.
Yes. So talk to me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mama.
Okay, I just wanted to just read a quotation. Now everybody knows about Fanny Jackson Coppin. Okay,
Yes.
I mean, if you know anything about Cheney or the Institute for Colored Youth or whatever, you're always the name Fanny Jackson Coppin is just it's
there.
But the thing that I think is most interesting is, people think of, okay, this person was born in 1837, but they had something with them. Okay. Fanny Jackson Coppin said, and I love the shade of this quote. It seems necessary that we should make known to the good men and women who are so solicitous about our souls and minds that we haven't quite got rid of our bodies yet. And until we do, we must feed and clothe them. And this thing of keeping us out of workforces forces us back into charity.
Yeah.
So that kind of, she was clear-eyed about what she was doing. She was like, we need education because we need to be able to support ourselves and our communities.
We gotta live.
And that's right.
Yeah.
And Gertrude Bastille Moselle, who herself was a teacher and an abolitionist and author, she actually wrote the 1894 book, The Work of Afro-American Women. She was in her book, basically what she did was an early shout out before there was such thing that was called a shout out. She did an early shout out to women who were Black women who were and Black Philadelphia women who were at the forefront at the early stages of the movement to educate our people. And the text lists 19th century Black Philadelphia teachers who have largely gone unnoticed: Julia Jones, Lottie Bassett, Frazelia Campbell.
Names. That's right.
Pet Kiger, Salon Yates, Susie Horter, Florence Cozen, Fanny Somerville, Molly Durham, and Annie Marriott. Now, those are not all of the women, because it certainly includes those like Fasaha said, Fanny M. Jackson Coppin, Cordelia Jennings Atwell, and Carolyn LeCount. But the point is made that, just because we don't know of these women doesn't mean that they weren't there.
Yes, exactly.
And doing this hard work.
Doing the spade work.
Yes.
Grinding at the bottom so that we have a tower to climb. Building
Scrapping and crawling.
Yes, you still trying to
figure out the words.
Hugging and loving, get with the kitchen. You still trying to figure out the words.
I get stuck like that.
Listen, it's fine. Co-conspirators, if you know which line Sissy is trying to refer to, please write it in the chat so we can know if it's from Moving On Up. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about
it. Might be from Good Times. I don't know.
Oh, it could be. Oh, yes. A shucking and a jiving. Good times. It is good times.
Is it crawling south? What does Nora know? Come on, Nora. Is it crawling south?
You got me singing on air, child. Let me.
All right.
Well, fortunately, I will not, do that to you.
You won't join in. You won't join in. Let's get into this education section of the book. So, as you know, we are out here trying to rebuild this Black teacher pipeline and recruit more educators into the field, but at the same time, like lifting up the voices of Black educators in this ecosystem. What can we learn from the journeys of the women that you wrote about to inform us now about rebuilding this Black educator pipeline?
Well, let me just say one thing that, I think that one of the reasons that, that was identified really in the late 80s, early 90s, one of the reasons that it's difficult to rebuild the pipeline really is from a good thing. And that is there was a time when Black women could only be teachers or nurses.
Right.
Okay. There was a time like that. And fortunately, the whole landscape for what Black women can do and be has opened up tremendously. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But what that means is that I think that some of the work that the center is doing about lifting up the idea of being an educator, the revolutionary potential of that, the community building potential of that. People might not want to go into teaching for their own personal benefit, but people who are attracted to the idea that this is an important community effort, that this is a contribution that I can make that will make a long-term difference for people who I know and love, that I think is a big part of it. That we really do have to say that this is kind of a sacred profession.
And
this
you know what?
Sacred profession.
I'm sorry.
No,
and we've gotten away from that.
Yes,
teaching has for whatever reasons has become this last thought.
Like if I can't do anything else, I'll teach.
I teach.
Yeah.
And like I like to say to folks when they find out that I have a doctorate. Whether or not it's a lawyer, whether or not it's a medical doctor or a psychologist or anything like that, who I find myself speaking with, what I like to say is, and it's because of those of us who worked in education that others were able to succeed. Think about that, think about that. And that, that's real important. And beyond that, I would like to ask you to state your question again, because I think I have a really good response to it, but I want to make sure I heard it. Do you remember what your question was?
Yes. So I was saying, what can we learn from the journeys in the section of education of the women that you guys wrote about? What can we learn that will help us inform our journey to rebuilding the Black teacher pipeline? Because these women have done so much.
Sure, they have. We're talking about this. Those things that we previously said, and we need to use the word representation. I believe that representation matters. That when young Black kids see us, they could see themselves. Right. When professional Black people, male or female, see us, leaders like us, they can see themselves. And that's one of the things that was really, to some extent, actually to a large extent, and still is the case, absent in higher education. And that's where I enter. So you always hear me talking about that piece of the pipeline, that there were not many people who looked like me, in those upper level positions. And I think that, when minorities and Black women and Black men see people like me and see people like Fasaha, I think that matters. The other thing that I think is that we have to have a large dose of this, and I'm going to read this.
Mhm.
This was written by a former law student of Phoebe Haddon, one of the women who's profiled in the education chapter of our book. And this student wrote to Phoebe, "Happy New Year. As the new year dawns, I am filled with gratitude. I would like to thank you for being a shining example and the embodiment of the childhood fantasy of an impoverished first generation student from the housing projects who felt out of place and overwhelmed in law school. I was a student in your race and law course at Temple Law. At 23, I was married with a toddler, just trying to drag myself to the finish line. I was all but convinced that I did not belong. That is, until I met you. There you were, poised, black, regal, and brilliant, not just fitting in, but defining and redefining the space. We need a whole lot of that. And
Yes.
so these educators who are in your pipeline and pipeline series, similar to yours, um, they are needed. They are necessary. And the more that work, continues, again, like, from the center and other entities, the stronger we can make this thing.
Yes, and representation matters, like you said.
Yeah.
We talk all the time about windows and mirrors, and we know that with the rate of educators right now, especially being 80% white and female in the K-12 space, our kids are getting a lot of windows, looking out at other people's experience and seeing other people
Mm.
in leadership, but not
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot of mirrors. They're seeing
Mm-hmm.
themselves and the people who lead them, and seeing an attainable goal. That like I can be a teacher, and I too can be a leader. So representation is definitely big. But
Yes.
I want you guys to talk about from your perspective, why is teaching seen as a tool to uplift our race? I think that is especially in the beginning of the education part of your book as basically teaching. Especially Black women have used that as a tool for uplifting our people.
Well,
Go ahead. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that goes way back beyond even
yeah.
1619. That goes back to, that it is not possible today to be able to succeed and flourish without education. And when
Mhm.
Yeah.
I say education, I mean being able to read, write, and think.
The basics.
Count. If you're not able to do those things, then that there is really no hope for you um, to really be able to succeed. And one of the things that I think is really important about us reclaiming is that that is a part of our tradition.
That's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes,
right. That is
Mm-hmm.
that is
who
a
we
part
Mm-hmm.
of our
are.
tradition, and we should not let anybody take that away from us. Okay,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I don't care whether you're talking about Frederick Douglass or Fanny Jackson Coppin or whoever you're talking about.
Mhm.
There's always been a line. There's always been a theme, a through line about the importance of education, and whether that was self education, self development. And in fact, I would say that one of the most important things that you get from studying Black history is that Black people have always seen freedom not as liberty necessarily, but
Mhm.
as development.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Freedom has
Yes.
always meant the capacity to develop
Yes.
yourself
It's yourself. That's
into
right.
whatever you can
You
become.
want to be.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
This notion of the road to social uplift.
Hmm.
The ability to be able to fully participate in what happens with you,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and rather than having people act on you and upon you, but you being able to participate in that. And
Hmm.
I will say unequivocally that I am a strong advocate for education, and I will push a young person to the brink of insanity. Okay, if they don't get where I think that I know they can go.
That's right.
Okay, you know what I'm saying? That in that and that's whatever that looks like. And quite frankly, it's taken me. I've gone through a process of saying, okay, that of owning that not everyone goes to higher, no, not everyone goes to college.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, but wherever it is that you intend to go, you're not going to get there without knowing how to read and write, do math,
And
Right.
think,
and,
think.
and think, critical thinking, and make strides in this world of ours. That's in Philadelphia and beyond.
Beyond.
The women of they carried us, again. Well, what we one of the things we haven't said is that there was such a place for mothers in these women's lives.
That's right.
Okay. And, probably almost to a woman, they had mothers who, and fathers, but I'm talking about Black women right now,
Mm-hmm.
who, were, hell bent on their success. And again, whatever that looked like. A number of these mothers founded schools in the city of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And their daughters, as you'll read in the chapter, and their daughters, followed in their
Became
footsteps.
teachers.
From
They
the,
became
that's right, from the Fortin women to the
Yep.
Bastille women, to the Jennings,
Mm-hmm.
on and on. And these schools were, there was the Ohio Unclassified School. There was the Raspberry School. There was the Free African School for girls. And private homes. These women established schools in their homes.
Their own homes. That's
Their
right.
own homes.
Yep.
Okay. And of course there was the Institute for Colored Youth,
Yes.
which evolved into Cheney.
In the university.
And Black women had their hands all over that.
All up in it, cooking in
All
the
up
pot.
in it. Yeah.
So who said we don't
I
have
can't-
a history and a legacy of education? Okay.
We do. And that, one of the, and then another thing is that, Fasaha and I, we were amazed at some point, and maybe we shouldn't have been, but we were. And I think that speaks to our lifelong learning. We were amazed to see these connections across not just a decades, but across centuries. These things that the women were fighting for and fighting against, continued. We could talk about these early women, but then the other women who picked up the torch were the Connie Claytons, were the Ruth Wright Hares,
Yes. Yep.
and other women, in the book as well. But
And
some
do you
people
think that like Black women feel that it's our responsibility to carry the mantle for education? Do you think they feel that load?
I think some do, and I think more should. I think some do, and I think
more should. And I would
Speak
agree
to
with
that.
her.
Speak to that when you say more should.
Well, I think this goes back to the question of, making this a crusade.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people, there have always been occupations that people have really been drawn to, that you're not drawn to them because you feel like you'll make a lot of money. Okay.
Right.
That's not why you're drawn to them.
Right.
Okay? You're drawn to
Right.
them because of the intrinsic feedback about the importance of what you're doing, your
That's right.
love for the people that you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, that we need to rekindle some of that, and part of rekindling it is not just saying to, any individual, you should feel like this is a crusade. It's about out here in the community, out in the churches, the mosques, wherever we are congregating, we need to be elevating teachers. We need to be saying, this is an important occupation and this is what you should do. And
That's right.
we have to create an atmosphere where um, where young people sense that this is a valued occupation.
That's right. I mean, I think you make a fantastic point. In some of my research and with us trying to build this Black educator pipeline, I am finding that this profession is not attractive to young people. It's not
Yeah,
marketed to young people in a way that they see it as obtainable or something that they even want to do. Um,
right.
the concern that I have though is that this is the way that this profession is treated in our community. Because as
Yeah.
we can see, young white women are coming into the profession in droves, feeling like it's their
Hmm.
civic duty to save Black children. You have some who are down to be, abolitionists and liberators with us in this movement, but there's a large majority of them that feels like it's their civic duty to save the Black child. But for some
Hmm.
reason, we're not pushing to our own children and Black children. It's your civic duty to have responsibility in your own community. We're not here to save
Well,
anybody. It's
yeah,
your duty to help, to be
yeah.
a contributor to your community.
I really want to jump in on that because
Yeah, get in.
you know, I taught on that topic quite a bit when I was at Arcadia again. My students were graduate and doctoral level education students, and one of the texts that I used and it's interesting because I mentioned this yesterday. The text "Essential Conversations" by Professor Lawrence Lightfoot. This book grappled with the connections and relationships or lack thereof between schools and parents,
Mm.
and the fact that primarily the fact that over time schools had become this uh, enemy, almost in a way, for lack of a better word. That parents were always being only called when their kids were doing something wrong or bad, or that they were being talked down to. That there essentially was not a relationship based on the best interests of the child that existed between schools and parents, and especially black parents and their children's schools. So over time we've seen this divide develop, really, that black parents send their kids to school because that's the thing that they're supposed to do, and not so much as we should, but the school is not the place where they can get support and understanding themselves. And I do think that has a part in what we're seeing now.
Oh,
That relationships between parents and schools has got to be rebuilt.
it has to be
Yeah.
stronger, it has to be better. And school leaders have to see parents as partners and not
Mm-hmm.
as customers that you're providing a service to, or customers who don't even deserve a superb service, right? Because when I was in schools, I would have to tell people like we are of service to parents. Like
Right, but
we
the other thing is
their
that
children.
we have to demand that. We have
Agree.
to,
Oh,
we have
parent
to demand that.
empowerment,
We just this is
100%
I am not tolerating anything less
less for my child.
for my child. That's right.
That's right. So I want to get into this question. And then we can go back to some other things if we have time. But I want to play a game with you guys called Education Pipeline Squad. So from your book in that educator chapter, if you had to pick 3 women
Oh, come
from the book
on.
to start a school with, 3 women from that book to start a school
Oh.
with, who would it be and why? I mean,
Well,
the book.
here, one of them would have to be Nellie Rathbone Bray.
Okay.
She was a principal of a Germantown school, and even before Carter G. Woodson came up with Negro History Month, she decided that she was going to have all of the most, interesting and important and inspiring people come to her school on a regular basis because she believed that if Black kids knew something about Black history, that it would help them educationally. She had Marian Anderson in there. She had Roland Hayes in there. She brought people in there on the regular to try to, let people know that whatever it is that you're seeing right in front of your face is not the horizon. The horizon is out there, and I want to show you what it is.
She's one. So
that was one.
Yes, that was one. That was one.
Dr. Rogers, you could go next. We don't have to
come
go
on.
in a row,
We don't have to do it all in order. Well, I can't go anywhere without Ruth Right Hair.
Yes, that's my pick. But go ahead.
I'm just saying. Let me tell you something. I have never talked to so many grown folk as the women who are interviewed in this book who talked about their teacher, Ruth Right Hair. Yeah. Okay. I mean, grown women. Mm-hmm. I remember when Dr. Hare, and this woman left such an impression. This educator left such an impression that so many other women became educators. And that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about.
Here was out here knocking down doors to get to places, building nations, inspiring people, and taking droves of people with her through this movement. That sister she would be one of my picks.
That's
definitely.
Right. So yeah, there you go. Go on, Fasaha. Who else you got? Come on, I want to hear who else you got.
Okay, let me. I have taken to checking up on Connie Clayton.
Okay.
Every few weeks.
She's on my list.
She's on my honorable mention. She's on my honorable mention. But yes, Connie Clayton.
The reason that Connie is on my list is that, number one, if you mention her name to a certain age student in Philadelphia, the first thing that comes up with Connie Clayton is No Clothes Clayton.
No clothes. I was going to say that. Come on, you stole that from me.
Because and what was important about that was not just that she would hardly ever close the schools for any reason. That was important. And of course, none of the kids liked that, but she knew it was important. But what was important was what that communicated to kids about their capacities, what was needed, what was necessary. And she always tagged that with the kids come first.
Or it was about the success of our children.
Yes, yes, exactly. That was her focus. She looked through that lens. Whatever she was doing, that was the lens she looked through. And that's, so many people, they're more worried about, what the mayor is going to say or what the whoever is going to say. Not her.
My sis.
What's good for the kids. Okay. And so I just, I think that she is not given nearly the kinds of accolades that she deserves. I really, even though many people have recognized her for lots of stuff, but I think that she was sort of like the last superintendent who unified Philadelphia around education.
They got the people going. They got the people invested.
Yeah, and I would add that she was on my list for all those reasons, and because I'm just going to say it, she didn't take no stuff, and you need somebody like that. You need some. From an administrative standpoint, for all those out there who might be interested in one day becoming an administrator of education in some way, you need to be tough and you need to be sure and firm about why you're there. She was a boss.
Yeah, and I think that the important thing about that is not just that she ran the show. That was very important, but she ran the show on behalf of some values.
Right.
Some values about the kids. Right. And lots of people didn't like it.
Yeah. She knew what she was doing. Yeah. Okay, so I would also add Cordelia Jennings Atwell, because You know what? I'm just going to say I would roll with her any day because she could touch something and make it happen. If she wanted a school to be there, it was there. If she wanted kids to be there, it was there. Whether or not it was in her mother's living room or moving the kids out of her mother's living room and setting them up in a school or, her own school or folding them into, the Philadelphia schools at that point and hiring other graduates from the Institute for Colored Youth. Okay. So, she didn't go somewhere else, and find teachers. She had, as far as I'm concerned, homegrown teachers,
Teachers. Yep.
for her homegrown students. So, I would take Cordelia, yeah, any day. Can I read
Cordelia's
something about these women?
Yeah.
So this is the last chapter in the introduction to the education chapter. And it says, following are the life stories of these determined women who were not only educators, but in every case, civic and community activists. That's also what we need in our educators.
So important.
They represent the enslaved, freeborn, working, and elite women hell-bent on educating their sisters and brethren for the purpose of social uplift by becoming teachers and establishing schools, literary associations, and philanthropic bequests for educational advancement, and on and on. So, I mean, that's fire.
That is fire. That's fire. That's school activism pipeline right there. Okay,
exactly.
That's telling you, like, I'm not just in here teaching just to be teaching. This isn't just about reading, writing, and arithmetic. This is about social uplift. Like, we are here to impact the race, right? Like that is our existence. But seeing teachers, especially Black teachers, in their fullness and in that role and what it really means, especially in today's society, right? Because we are at war, trying to protect our children's. So really talking about what that means to be a Black teacher in today's society and how revolutionary that is. Teachers don't get painted in that light. And the call isn't put out to young Black people in the way that you just illustrated on what you represent and who you are by entering the education field. So I mean, that is fire, and that is so deep. The way it was written. So, ladies, we are actually coming up on time. But what I always like to give my guests a chance to do is give a final word. If there's anything you want to say out there to the co-conspirators watching right now, or any final message you would like to leave us with, I'll give you guys the floor.
Go ahead, Sissy. You start.
For me, it's really plain and simple, sounding at least. But we're not going to make it. We as a Black community are not going to make it until more of us get back into the classroom. I used to really struggle with that belief because it meant that other people weren't good enough, teaching us. Well, the fact of the matter is that we need us. In today's world, as chaotic and crazy as it is, with all the racism and, social divide and all that stuff, we need us back in the classroom. And that's just, again, it's not the K-12, but it's also the college level classrooms as well. And I'm putting, what is that expression? I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm not just saying it, but I'm doing it. And it's hard, being a sub at a high school, man, oh man, but it's, it's important work. So.
Well, what I'm going to say is something that I said to my daughters this morning, and that is, we really need, this is a very specific ask. I hope that all over the city of Philadelphia this summer, there are going to be myriad efforts to beef up what children can learn over the summer in preparation for schools reopening in September. I hope that, the summer freedom schools, that, community organizations, that universities, I hope that there are multiple ways and multiple sites for children who have been, I don't know what you would call our pandemic pedagogy, Okay, I don't know what you would call that, but
Surviving in these streets, child. But
it's not enough. It is not enough, and I want to say that I would volunteer a couple hours a week in any such effort.
appreciate you, Mama Fasaha. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Oh, look at your face, because I was about to get it be. Oh, sorry, Fasaha. I want to thank everybody out there for joining me with Fasaha and Sissy today in our conversation. Please go out and get their book. They carried us. You can also find them on all social media networks under the title They Carry Us. As always, I want to thank you for watching and participating with us today. If you enjoyed today's show, even if you didn't, like, share, and please comment. As always, I want to plug the Centers Freedom Schools Literacy Academy. We still have applications open for rising first through third graders out there and any college students and high school students who are interested in teaching. You can find us at www.thecenterblacked.org. So please check out our Freedom Schools. And as always, thank you today for watching. I'll see you here next week live at 12 p.m.